Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Commentator Ninja Channel. My name is Mary Layton. I'm the Commentator Ninja, and we are here today for part 2 with Dr. Elspeth Hart. She is a sports medicine doctor. She has her own clinic in Boston at Boston Children's Hospital, where you can go and get training as a ninja on preventing your injuries, or if you have an injury, she can get you back into the sport with the most positive outlook possible. She also has connections to the whole multidisciplinary team for athletes, whether that be the mental side of things, the nutritional side of things. So full service there. I think that's a super cool resource. Elly, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your clinic, what you have going on there before we jump into part 2 of our injury prevention chat about shoulder health?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me back, Mary. I am so excited to be here for part 2. So just to give everybody a little background about my sports medicine clinic that I have here at Boston Children's Hospital. It's located actually in Waltham, though we are Boston Children's. We are at the satellite. And what's really cool and unique about the clinic is I guarantee that my patients get in either that same day or the next day to see me for their visit. So meaning if they had what's called an acute injury, so you fell off a ninja obstacle last night, your arm is bothering you, you want to figure out what's going on, we get you in. I can order same day x-rays, same day MRIs, which is a fancy test to look at bones, muscles, tendons, and ligaments. Or maybe there's something chronic that's been bothering you. Your shoulder's been aching, you don't know what's going on, it's getting worse for you. Come on in. I'll get you evaluated, I'll figure out exactly what's going on and get you the treatment that you need. So that's one aspect and one service that I have. I'm covered by insurance, which is great. I see patients ages 6 to 86. So I essentially see everybody on the spectrum. So child, young adult, and older ninjas, always happy to see and figure out what's going on. And then the other really cool part about the clinic is we have what's called a return to play protocol. So I do have a mini ninja rig / wall in my clinic space that we can actually see, hey, when you hang on it, what muscles are you activating? Do we need to work on your biomechanics, meaning how do you move and do different things that might predispose you or make you more likely to have an injury? How can we work on that and change that? And also, just as Mary mentioned, we have our multidisciplinary team. So if you not only need to see me for your injury from the orthopedic standpoint, we also have a sports nutritionist here, sports psychologist here to really sort of round out the team for you. So yeah, come visit if you need anything. We'll put links and maybe the information in a bio somewhere.
Absolutely. I think that the fact that you can do same day or next day is just so incredibly valuable. As an athlete who has had to wait a really long amount of time to know what's going on, there's nothing more frustrating than just kind of sitting here like, okay, what can I do? What should I do? What should I not do? Am I, this feels okay, but am I putting myself to worsen the injury? And even as a coach too, we have kids that get injured and then come in and they're like, okay, this hurts. And we're like, okay, okay, try to avoid things that hurt, but usually that's kind of our best guess. So for the coaches working with those athletes, that's huge to know what they can and can't do safely. Is something that I really value that as an athlete and as a coach too. So everyone, I'm just going to remind you of who Elly is in the ninja community. So she was my #1 pick for New England regionals. Actually, that was the first year I ever did regional, like a regional type video and made predictions. And I was right. And I think that Elly was my lucky charm right there. She went on to get 3rd place at WNL Worlds that year. During her season, she was the top athlete on the female side and the male side. So she beat all the guys, got further and got there faster than they did. She's a complete speed demon. And she also competed as a level 10 gymnast at the age of 23, which is kind of unheard of in the gymnastics realm. So she is a killer athlete. She trains at Vitality Obstacle Fitness with Jordan Thurston. So she knows ninja and she knows high level ninja as well. So not only is she super smart, she's a doctor. I'm just super psyched to have somebody who's been in the sport to comment on our topic today. And that is the all important shoulder health. So Elly, what do you think when you think of ninja and shoulder health?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is there's a lot of shoulder pain in ninja.
Yep.
I'll put it that way.
Yes.
So ninja is very unique in its sport, as all those ninjas know out there, that we are swinging from our arms that we are putting our arms in different positions that aren't normal, and even grip positions too that we're using are not normal everyday functions. So we are truly pushing not only our shoulder, but our elbow, our wrist, and our fingers into different positions that not everyone knows how to do. So the first thing that I think of is, how do we prevent injuries, and also what injuries should we be looking out for within the ninja community as well. I kind of just thinking about that in terms of the shoulder itself. So for those of you who don't know, got a lovely shoulder model as well today.
Oh, I love all these models.
This is what the shoulder looks like. Oh, yes. So we have right here, this is your humerus. So essentially this is the bone that's right here on your arm. And the shoulder is called a ball and socket joint. So these are our ligaments and tendons that we have here. So this is actually a right shoulder. So if I were to put this on my back, that's what it would look like. This part right here is your clavicle, or the front portion of your shoulder that you can feel. This back here is your scapula. So again, it kind of goes right back like this. So you can actually feel your scapula or your shoulder blade behind you. Now, the shoulder, like I just said, is a ball and socket joint. So meaning it's sitting inside of the joint and kind of moving it around. A lot of sports medicine providers will describe it as a golf ball on a tee situation, because there's a lot of movement that happens within our shoulder. And the way that we stabilize our shoulder is with our rotator cuff muscles. And that's the first thing that I think of when I think of injuries and ninja, especially older athletes, so athletes over the age of 25, is either a rotator cuff strain or even a rotator cuff partial or full tear. And we need those rotator cuff muscles to keep our shoulder in socket. So that's one of the first things that I do think of when I think of ninja and injuries as well. Now, a more common injury that we would see more in sort of the young adult adolescent is shoulder subluxations or dislocation episodes. So meaning your shoulder comes out of the socket, either completely or partially back and forth. And when that happens, you damage an area called the labrum. So the labrum is a cartilage fiber that's on the inside that helps keeps your joint in place. And when you start sliding in and out, you damage that inner cartilage, which then can create like catching, locking, and again, those feelings of instability. And then when I think of my youngest athletes, so those who are still growing, I think about growth plate injuries. So there's a growth plates all throughout your body. They help you grow nice and tall one day, or whatever height you might be predicted at by your pediatrician. And what can happen is, from pounding, impacting, swinging, tugging on growth plates, there can be inflammation in them. A very common one that I see a lot, not only in ninjas, but just general athletes, is something called little league shoulder, which is the growth plate that's in your humeral head. So from all the traction and hanging and pulling, you can actually injure that growth plate. So just kind of thinking, just general injuries to look out for. Those are probably the three most common on each of those different age groups, if you will, there.
Wow. So much to tackle there. So, where do we even start? So there's good body mechanics. There's good posture. There's a balanced training regimen. And I think I think we should probably talk about all of those things. So let's start with balanced training regimen, which I think will probably be the easiest one for most ninjas to understand. That it's not balanced. So we are overhead athletes. Our arms are always up here. We're always doing this, reaching. And our lats get huge, which is great. We can do the little like flare and feel like we're super strong, could be bodybuilders, all that good stuff. But I'd love for you to go into like the antagonist protagonist side of muscle balance. And why should ninja not be the only thing you do to train upper body strength? Why don't we start there?
Ooh, I love this question. Yes. So just sort of start with some general statements. So sports specialization is kind of what Mary was just touching upon. So sports specialization means that you're only doing one sport all season long. That's the only thing that you do 24/7. That's it. So sports specialization has actually shown that athletes are more likely to be injured, fatigued, and actually end up quitting the sport because of the fact that they essentially are only doing that sport 24/7. So truly burnout, fatigue, and injury are at its highest when you're doing that. So totally agree with Mary. We want to diversify our platform. Now, that being said, I'm sure a lot of ninjas are only doing ninja right now. So what can we do that would sort of help supplement maybe some of our training? And so when I do think about sort of other things that could be really beneficial is making sure that we have a good strength and conditioning program. And that's not just upper body training, that's core strength, back strength, hip strength, glute strength, leg strength, even foot strength and ankle strength, and making sure that we balance everything from essentially head to toe. And when I do think about kind of recruiting other muscles, like you were just discussing, the biggest thing is, can we first stabilize the shoulder? So one of the biggest things that I do see in ninja is working those big giant muscles. So like you just mentioned, your lats, your biceps, the muscles that we can all see when we flex them at the beach kind of thing. However, we need to be working actually the really tiny muscles that stabilize. So it's not, always going for your heaviest lift, your heaviest workout. It's actually using bands and proper technique and posture and form as you do slow, repetitive motions. And it's not to say you only do that. And it's not to say you only lift heavy. It's doing truly a variety and sort of really introducing different exercises and different elements into your routine, whether that's at your warm up, your conditioning. That's incredibly important as ninjas, and even just to prevent injuries with all sports and athletics as well. So truly focusing on shoulder stabilization, because we are doing so many big reaches and turns and twists and laches, if you will, as far as we can go, right? That's sort of the new thing is how far do you do your lache, right? And even just for example, I love giving the example of cliffhangers. So thinking about how most people do them. When I first started ninja, I just hopped on a cliffhanger, let my body dead hang, and I was trying to just hold on with my fingers. For those of you who have also tried to do that, you don't do so well. I'm going to put it that way. However, working with Jordan, working with my coaches, teammates, asking them, hey, what are we doing? What muscles are we activating? They sort of showed me, how do you work on good posture? How do you use your upper back? How do you use essentially your periscapular muscles, not just your finger grip to hold that position? Are you engaging your core, right? Instead of letting your body just relax and hang there. I know I am totally guilty of it. You can ask Jordan that I will relax my core. There's a running joke that there's a 6-kick Elly out there, which is totally true sometimes because I forget to engage my muscles and I truly rely on my joints to make myself swing through the air.
Oh my gosh.
And so even as an athlete, that's something that I even need to focus on and work on. So I'll sometimes really break down the skill and go somewhere where I feel safe and comfortable, but I'll say, am I tucking in, right? Am I squeezing my lats? Is my core engaged? Am I making sure that I'm not rounded here, but I'm actually sitting up with straight posture, that I'm reaching for what I need to with my whole body versus just letting my joint essentially sublux or come in and out and come back in. Because I think so many ninjas, that's a lot what I see is that flaring of your scapula or your shoulder blades. One of the best tests that you can actually do is have somebody do like 5 push-ups, just like leaning up against a wall, and then have them put their arms down by their sides. And notoriously, you will see on their weaker side, their scapula will actually kick out. So their shoulder blade will kick back. We call that scapular winging. And it's a really good test to say, hey, we need to work on upper back periscapular strength. So that way we make sure you're not going to have a shoulder injury, because if you're not using your upper back, all that force going right into your joint. So that's when we get those rotator cuff injuries, labrum tears, shoulder dislocation, subluxation episodes, growth plate injuries. That's when those start to happen.
So that was kind of one of the questions that I wanted to talk about, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it. But you mentioned this is the number one thing that I will call some of my teenagers on is this. I have this thing right here, this posture. So obviously your mom's always going to tell you to stand up straight, right? But in ninja, I want everyone to understand this. This is a sign that you're weak back here. And if you're operating from here, like that's not the optimal position for your shoulder to be functioning in.
Correct. 100% true, Mary. And even when we're thinking of those rounded position, I actually do this in the clinic all the time. I say, round your shoulders and now lift up your arm by your ears. It's going to stop, right? So yeah, round your shoulder. Yeah, right. You stop, right? But then sit up nice and tall and now lift, right? You're getting more motion.
Yeah.
So more motion means you can use more of your muscle. It's lengthening your muscle. So you're actually going to get more power, more speed. You're going to have more endurance because you haven't shortened that muscle so much in this position right here. So for those athletes who we are seeing rounded, the best way you can convince them to work on good posture is truly by saying, do you want to be more powerful, more strong, faster, have better endurance, right? It's working on those basics of posture, really periscapular strength and thoracic mobility. That's where it's at.
Yeah. I think it's definitely hard sometimes for younger athletes, especially, to understand that movements that aren't necessarily ninja movements do make you better at ninja.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally true. I'm also always very baffled when I have an athlete come in who's either ninja gymnast even, and I have them hang on my bar in clinic and I say, can you do just 10 scapular pull-ups? And truly meaning you hang and truly just pull down and activate your scapula. So I'm not bending my elbow for those who can't see the rest of my arm.
Yeah.
It's truly pulling down. And the number of athletes who struggle with that, but can do, 10, 20, about like 10, 15 foot laches, right? Those big laches, but struggle with such a simple movement. To me, you're just setting yourself up for a potential injury in the future as well. So yeah, it's really working on the periscapular strength, thoracic mobility. So for those of you who don't know, you have your cervical spine, which is your neck, your thoracic is your upper back, and your lumbar is your low back. And so often with this tight rounded position from texting, posture work, just sort of general motion of being here, we lose thoracic mobility. So we actually lose shoulder forward flexion. We lose the ability to actually activate all of our muscles. We have those imbalances that Mary was just talking about. And so that would be sort of one of the things for sure to start focusing on when we're thinking of an injury prevention plan and how do we stay healthy throughout our ninja season.
Yeah. So when we're talking about preventing injuries, so would it be fair to say that the younger athletes are usually more like traumatic acute injuries that happen versus older adults? Those are probably more so going to be like overuse injuries. Is that fair?
Correct. Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair to say. I would say also too, when we're thinking of our younger versus our older athletes, I myself am an older athlete, so I can not, but I would say we tend to be tighter, right? So we're already in this position. Now we're more in this position, right? Our young athletes are more hypermobile. They have more movement. So they can get away, right? When you're younger, you can monkey through kind of anything with your joints, right? So you're creating instability at a young age. And now that we see ninjas becoming a lifelong sport, right? Our 10-year-olds are now in the adult division, right? It's been around long enough. And so from my perspective, my hope is that we can put them on an injury prevention plan when they're 10, so they can get to that 18-year-old ninja, that elite, that high-level ninja, versus having them rely on their joint and the flexibility to get through everything. So really strength training at a young age with proper and safe technique is key to kind of helping us prevent and keep our sport relevant, if you will, and keep those awesome athletes ready to go.
Yeah. I think one of at our gym, last season, we had the kids do an injury prevention workout. We did that, it was a separate thing that they had to do on their own. It was moderately successful just because, if you're trusting them to do it on their own, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. We had some awesome athletes put in a lot of effort. I'm very proud to say that most of my teenagers stand up a little bit straighter now, which is great. But I think that the kind of thought process, and I found myself thinking this too, is like, all right, like they're here in the gym for like, a half an hour before they even start class, and they're swinging on everything. So why is a warm up important? And I've always kind of, had to pull myself back and be like, it's the foundation, right? It's not that they like quote unquote need it right now. Yeah, they're warmed up. They could do a full course run, do a grip gauntlet, and they'd be fine, right? So why do they need to warm up? But I think it's just laying that foundation of like, hey, as you're getting older, like it's really important to do this. And another thing we've tried this year is that we've incorporated more of that scapular activation into the warm up, because it's like, hey, one, it makes you feel really great. I love doing scapular stuff. It makes me feel ready to hang on things. But it's just like another way to be like, hey, they're a class every week. Have them do it there. Have them start getting it there. And then it's hopefully starts incorporating into more of their own warm-ups when they're doing competitions. So
It is, yeah. And I think one of the other things too that we'll start to see a lot with Ninja, just with any sport, right, is that each athlete might need something a little bit different, right? So there might be some athletes who are truly well balanced, right, in their upper extremity. Then you look at their legs and you're like, wait a second, you need to do some leg work, right? Or maybe you see that there's someone who's super mobile, right? They have great thoracic motion, their posture is excellent, but when they try to do a pull up, they just they get stuck, right? So I think we're going to see that as you get more advanced in the levels, as Ninja gets harder and harder each year, that each athlete might need an individualized plan.
yeah.
And I'll give like the example of myself. So I know, so I had an ankle injury. That was my one bad ninjury, if you will, so far. Knock on wood over here. Okay. Exactly. Right. Knock on all the wood.
Yeah.
And so for me, like I already had a pre-existing ankle injury beforehand and before this happened, but I do a little extra kind of ankle strengthening and injury prevention. Also for me, like I've had my shoulder dislocate before, not from Ninja, from gymnastics. And so I spend a little extra time on some band work, working on posture, making sure that my body is truly ready to go before I do Ninja. Now, you compare me to, say, a 10-year-old female, right? We'll go sort of gender specific, right? That 10-year-old female probably doesn't need to work as much as her strengthening in her shoulder as I do, right? She hasn't had the wear and tear of gymnastics and life and things on her shoulder. So perhaps she needs more. How do you stabilize your shoulder in terms of just scapular movement, right? How do you recognize what muscles you're activating? So her program would be slightly different than mine is. And that's where, as a coach, it does get pretty tricky because we're sort of introducing all these injury prevention techniques. But when they do get older to be a teenager, young adult, hopefully, right, just as you said, they've had these strategies and they can say, hey, Mary, the front of my shoulder feels a little different. I'm going to do more, and then they do that prevention exercise. And that's the hope, right? That we can help prevent those injuries as they're going through Ninja and through life. So
yeah, it's all about the foundation, and they're going to be adults at some point. So we got to prepare them for when they're still doing Ninja then. So we made the distinction, your younger athletes, if they're going to injure their shoulder, it's more the impact, right? Especially like in the teen division, preteen division, they're throwing bigger and bigger moves, catching larger and larger things, falling from greater and greater heights, hopefully onto solid mats. Well, not solid mats, squishy mats, like good squishy mats.
Safety, yes. No concrete floors. That's how I got. No, those concrete floors. At you. Woo.
Oh goodness. And for adults in the adult division, the masters division, we're looking more at overuse stuff. We did one too many laches. We did one too many reps on the cliffhangers or whatever that obstacle is. Are the exercises that you could do to strengthen your shoulders, strengthen that rotator cuff, and help prevent whether it's a trauma injury or an overuse injury, are those the same, or are there sometimes different ones?
Ooh, good question. Very good question. So I think the hard part about kind of the answer to this is it's sort of a two-part, right? So you do injury prevention for multiple reasons, and multiple different ages have different things that you want to focus on. So I do think that probably the injury prevention techniques can prevent both that acute fall, right? And also those long-term chronic injuries. It just depends on what type of exercises you're focusing on. So a great example, right, is I think we should have sort of I guess I would call it not a fitness ninja test, but there should be some kind of a requirement to maybe move up in a division, in a level, right? So for example, if you are unable to do a slow chin up or a slow pull up, I think it would be hard pressed to tell you to do even a 5-foot lache, right? I think that's way too aggressive because your shoulder is just the joint is going to take all of that force. Same thing too for young kids, right? If you're unable to grip or hold something, reaching for something on one arm, if you can't grip, you're going to slip off and you're going to cause an acute injury. So really kind of figuring out, are there a set of maybe metrics or recommendations before bumping to a new level, versus right now it's purely just age, right? It's age and whatever the gym sets up, right? And there's not really a restriction or a limit. I mean, I know they talked about, which I appreciated, right? They made some female adaptions, which were great. But I think we still need to work on that too, right? And so, right, there's more on that one that we could talk about later, but and so maybe for, kids and adults, maybe there is a certain level, maybe there's a level system. And I know they do have, I believe they did it. I always mess up because they named it something last year, like a tier 1 versus a tier 2. Is that the right term?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So they do have that, but maybe there's a qualification round to go from that tier 2 to the tier 1, right? So maybe there's some kind of guidelines that we could put together as a ninja community to say, hey, we found that if you can do X, Y, and Z, this means it's safe to try this type of skill. And I think that's one of the hardest parts of ninja, is because different things are being developed and created with obstacles and distance and height, right? There isn't really a quote unquote sort of requirement, right? You just kind of go for it. Yeah, exactly. Right. And, on some courses, as you've set up, right, some things are closer together based off of, maybe you looked at height, right? Maybe you looked at gender, maybe you looked at skill level, right? So things are tweaked slightly, but are there maybe more recommendations that we can make as a community and come together so that we can prevent these types of injuries? Because I think there's sort of a spectrum of injury prevention. It's how do you put that to use, right? So.
Yeah, it's one of the things that a lot of people will compare gymnastics to ninja. But I think the biggest difference between gymnastics and ninja is the second you walk into a gymnastics gym, you are on a path to train to specific levels, right? And there's a set, like you're mentioning, foundational skills you have to have before you can progress to the next level. In ninja, we just want to see everybody do everything. Like, that's just always been the attitude. It's just like, we want you to do a lache on your first day because it's awesome and you're going to believe in yourself. And no. Yeah. So I think like what's I've been encouraged by is that more gyms are introducing a level system, right? And it's okay, what skills do we want these ninjas to have before we progress them to where we would put them on a competitive team, to where we would put them on, the junior varsity of Nina, for example. But I think that's more motivated by their ability on the obstacles, right? Like, could they do a lache? Could they not do a lache? Not so much, is their body ready for them to try a lache? So I think it's like we're still getting to the point where we kind of have to go that one layer deeper and take it, even more seriously than we're already taking it, to make sure we're protecting the long-term health of these kids as they come through our programs.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just by having this podcast and having this conversation, right, hopefully parents are listening and saying, oh, this is something, right, that we should be considering. And then if parents even want to go right above and beyond, it's saying, okay, my kid is a high level athlete. Is our nutrition up to date, right? Should we maybe using a sports nutritionist? How many hours of sleep is my child getting? So studies have come out for high level athletes. If you get 8 or less hours, you're 2 times more likely to be injured than somebody who got more than 8 hours.
Yikes.
So just like get your sleep, right? Like that's an easy one. Hydration, for example, everyone's going to laugh. I do drink this every day.
That's a lot of water.
Yeah. Granted, I should say every day, like 4 days a week. 4 days a week I do that. So the current recommendation, that's aggressive. That's like Tom Brady level, just so everybody knows. That's what Tom Brady did, so I did what Tom Brady did. The current recommendation, though, is you take your weight, you divide it in half, and that's roughly how many ounces you should drink every day. And that's usually the minimum number of ounces. So that's the average person, not even an athlete. So, checking in on that. Also checking in on stress levels, too. How do you feel when you're at the gym? She'll be involving a therapist, a sports psychologist, along with our sports nutritionist, right? So putting together that team for your high-level athlete is just so crucial, not only for athlete health, but just for life health in general. So
there's a lot to it. And I think what's interesting is that I don't know how many parents really think my 12-year-old's a pro athlete, right? Like, and it's one of those things where, you know, sometimes as coaches, we're like, yeah, please don't think your kid is a pro athlete. Like, just don't. But then they really are. I mean, they're competing at the highest levels of the competition. They are training the same amount as like a gymnast who's prepping to go to the Olympics, right? And for them, it's fun. And so it's just something that they do, but it's so physical that it is taking that toll on their bodies. So nuts to think about. All right, Elly. So I have some questions for you. So I'm a coach and I work with kids. What should I be looking for in my kids, whether that's in their posture or how they're doing certain movements, that's going to clue me in to think, okay, we need to maybe do some different types of strength training for you to make sure that everything's where it should be and we're not setting you up for an injury?
Yeah, awesome. Really good question. I think kind of one of the best cues. So I love using laches because I feel like that's kind of the most layman's term that I can use. It's similar to me saying like a cartwheel in gymnastics, like very easy, sort of people know what I'm talking about for those who are new to Ninja or advanced in Ninja. And so the first thing I would have someone do is hang on a bar. Literally, like number one, your athletes pop up and you see what are they doing. So for example, you say, hey, you know, little Susie, little Joey, hop up on the bar. And what you're looking for is when they're grabbing, are they just gripping with their fingers, right? Are they like dead clenching as hard as they can and the rest of their body is so relaxed, right? Are they activating their upper back, their scapula? Is their core tight, or are they just, again, hanging and letting their joints take all of the force? So I think hanging tells you so much about an athlete. So truly just you're on a bar, you're looking at what that kid's doing. Also, are their knees bent up by their chest? Have they gone into a ball because they're not able to activate and hang straight, right? Are their legs apart? What's going on sort of the lower half of the body that's there? Are they constantly regripping on the bar, right? Are they saying their hands are sweaty and they can't hold on because the bar is slippery, right? So all of those different things just by hanging gave me so many clues, right? So the athlete whose hands are slipping off, they're not gripping with their fingers, right? The athlete who's kicking their legs around, they're not engaging their core. The athlete who's just letting their body just kind of lay there straight isn't activating their scapula or their upper back muscles. So just a simple hang will tell you a lot about that athlete. So practicing a dead hang with scapular activation, key to start with, right? And what I would do is I'd have them do some scapular pull-ups, right? And I would say, can you just isolate, not bend your elbows and do this motion, but can you hang and pull down? Can you do that motion with your body? And you know, one thing you could do is kind of set it up as like a fun game, right? Like a sort of like a, hey, we're just trying to see who can hang the longest without wiggling their entire body, right? So that's sort of the first thing. Then let's see who can do the most scapular pull-ups. But if we see you bend your arms or we see you again lose technique or form, right, then you come down. And so you kind of get your measurements there. And of course, the scapular pull-up will tell you, are they activating upper back muscles, periscapular strength, or are we just, again, relying on our joints that are there? And this is more, of course, like upper extremity specific is what we're going for today for our visual cues, if you will. Then I would have them do a chin. I would have them do, right, like a front grip. We're testing your bicep strength. Can you hold there? And also, are you here when you're holding, right? Or are you nice and tall and you're in that position and your chin is above the bar versus we've all seen that person, right? And I've been there as well.
We've
so
all
not
been
to
that
worry.
person.
And then you reverse it, right? And then you go essentially, so we go biceps, then we reverse, we go tricep strength, same thing. Are you rotated in? Are you barely above the bar? Are you letting go, right? And then from those different hangs, then you go to chin-ups, you go to pull-ups. Once those are okay, right? That's when we start about monkey barring and seeing what does the body do. Now, I will say the one thing when I compare gymnastics to ninja, right, is gymnastics has a very specific technique. Its legs are together, feet are together. You're only going front to back in one plane motion. That is not the case in ninja. So I did have to learn, right, how to activate sort of other muscle groups besides the front to back. And able to do the side to side. So this isn't sort of a perfect plan to look at everything, but I think if we're trying to break down what are the basics of just hanging on a bar, that would be the start of it. And then once your athletes can do those sort of different things of hanging, scapular activation, regular chin holds, chin ups, chin pull-ups, once you're doing that, then you make it harder, right? So you add on
Yeah.
the extras from there. Then you add the side to side movement. And so there are sort of different ways to look at it. But I think as coaches, kind of going back to that sort of plan of like, what can I do, or what sort of requirements should we look
Yeah.
at, is kind of setting athletes up on that path to see what it looks like. And you'll notice such a huge change in their ability to lâcher farther, hang longer, have more endurance, just by those basics and those foundations. So
that is really good. So I have two questions. One's about posture. One is about, oh goodness, it was there. Oh, okay. One's about form. So you mentioned this in part one, just kind of this mentality of you should just go. Like you should always be training. You should always be trying to get stronger. You know, a day off is a day wasted. Like that sort of mentality has definitely trickled into ninja, was probably there from the beginning, right? Because, you know, a lot of the athletes that these kids have grown up with, looked up to, had that sort of training regimen. They just trained all the time. So I think as far as, and I remember this happened one time, we were doing some conditioning work, and we had kids doing just, I'll say it, a stupid amount of pull-ups, just a repeated amount of pull-ups. And I had just been, you know, kind of getting more into ninja. I had my own overuse injury in my shoulder. And so I had studied a lot about, you know, proper pull-up form. And I could tell, I was like, okay, these are not proper pull-ups. And so I had kind of a debate that spurned from that with one of the other athletes I worked with the group, because they were like, well, no, like they're building endurance. They're building endurance. But they were, as you said, they were here, right? They were kicking their knees up to try to like get there and everything like that. So I guess talk a little bit about, you know, why should you stop if your form is not where it's supposed to be? Why is that more important than pushing for those additional reps?
Yeah, great question. And I would say this is very common in a lot of sports, right? They kind of go till the end till they fall over, right? And that's not what we want to encourage at times. If you're going for your 1 rep max, that's different. That's 1 rep, right? 1 rep max, not multiple maxes, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's sort of a time and a place, right? So, for example, when you are doing improper technique, you're telling your body it's okay to be bent forward, right? It's okay to have these poor mechanics and use muscle groups and areas to overuse them, which we don't want to have happen. So that creates your overuse injuries that will then plague you and be chronic throughout your season. So sort of that quality over quantity, if you will.
Yeah.
Now, there will be exercises or times that you are going for endurance and power and speed and quickness, right?
Yeah.
But that should be led by your coach, who hopefully has a lot of knowledge and strength and conditioning foundation, so that we are doing it with proper form. And if we do see that essentially, right, we're struggling to get to that multiples, then we say, hold on, let's pause. Let's see how we can do this correctly. And I'll be honest with you, I wish back in the day in gymnastics, someone did that to me and said, hey, we need to work on your technique and your form of your conditioning, because I would just try to power through and really use, I'll be honest, my joints. And I don't know for those of you who are listening, but I've had fractures of my back. I fractured my knee. I fractured my wrist. I had 2 knee surgeries. My shoulder's dislocated. Like, I've had a lot of injuries that I think could have been prevented with proper and safe conditioning mechanisms. And so I do worry about kind of the future of these young ninjas who are just burning it, burning the midnight oil, if you will, and trying to do as many as humanly possible, but not have safe and proper technique or guidance or coaching. So,
yeah. All right. Now the posture question. So if we have an athlete that sits like this, or if themselves sit like this on it, what is one exercise that we could have them do that is going to help with that? Just like, there's no magic bullet for anything, but if you were a magic bullet for this issue to get them put their shoulders where they're supposed to be.
Yes. Okay. I actually love this one. There's actually a very easy one you can do. So you can do it against the wall. I'll do it sitting in my chair. Is essentially what you want to do. So here, maybe I'll go sideways. That'll help us a little bit. Okay. So if I'm in my chair and I'm really rounded, right, you can see that my upper back is not touching, right? But if I sit up nice and tall, right now I'm standing here, then what you're going to do is you're going to take your elbows. Now I'm just a little short in this one here, is you want to put them by your side. So now my elbows are by my side. I'm sitting up nice and tall. And you're going to pretend you have like a TheraBand in your hand and truly just pull out to the side and come back. And if you are squeezing your upper back muscles just by doing this, you will feel your scapula and your upper back work it, right? Yeah, you can feel it, right? So it's really just.
I don't even have a band or anything, but.
Right, exactly. Right. So some people don't even need a band. Exactly. But you are in this position, and that's what we can work. So that's a great one to do. And it's great too, because if you put like little kids up against the wall and then have them flatten their back against the wall, put their elbows against the wall and say, don't let your back come off or your elbows come off, you'll see some of them will actually get like stuck. Like they'll be like, I can't pull it. It's actually kind of a fun little exercise just to have people practice. The most common thing though that I see it done incorrectly is, again, they go back to the rounded and then they're doing this motion, which is not what we're doing. We're pulling out to the side. So, and the other thing too is like rib flaring, where the ribs flare out a lot. So that's why we talk about having something behind you, so you feel your back and low back pressed against it, and then really just pulling out to the side. It's a great exercise, and a lot of people feel it right away, which is why I think it's a good one to add in, with or without a band. I think that would be a great one to work on posture.
That's awesome. So. Yeah, I always get the complaint if I ever introduce a new exercise that isn't like super fun or super crazy, if they don't feel it, the athletes are like, what are we working? Like, what's actually happening? Why am I just moving my arms? And it's like, I promise there's a method to the madness, but one that they can feel. That's great. All right. Well, Elly, thank you so much for joining me today for part 2 of injury prevention. Guys, so much knowledge in this episode. You probably want to go back and watch it again. Elly, anything else you would like to add before we sign off here?
No, thank you so much for having me, Mary. This is always a pleasure to be on here. And just the fact that we are talking about injuries and injury prevention means that we are headed in the right direction. So I commend you in your efforts, and I'm happy to come back anytime. If you get tons of questions or someone says, let's talk about the ankle next, you let me know. I am ready and waiting for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the channel. Everybody, we hope you have a great day. This is Mary Layton and Elspeth Hart signing off.